So first of all, welcome. I'm Chad Kluck. I'm the web developer at the University of St. Thomas. We're actually just down the street here. We're a private Catholic university here in the state of Minnesota. First of all, what learning management systems are currently in use? How many people are not from like an academic library or anything? All right. So what LMS systems are currently in use on your campus? Anybody using Blackboard? A few, okay. What about Moodle? All right, a few. Canvas? All right, that's majority. And anything else? Yes?
We're getting away from D2L.
Okay, and going to Canvas. Okay, good. Yes?
We're also getting ready to migrate to Canvas as well.
Okay, good. So you'll be right on board. That's where we were about just over a year ago. We were getting ready to migrate to Canvas, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So those of us, whether you're on Blackboard, Moodle, or whatever, how many have installed an LTI, a learning tool integration? A few, okay. Anybody using the SpringShare LTI, either Automagic or, okay, good. Yeah, there's like two of them. There's like Automagic, which kind of does what I'm going to go over today, as well as some of the manual stuff that helps you embed information. All right, and how many would like to get started with at least one LTI? Maybe you haven't done one yet, but so a few. Okay, good number. Okay, good. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll know more about what an LTI is, some of the things you can do with an LTI. Sometimes you'll look at an LTI, maybe it does certain things that you don't exactly like. Maybe there's certain things you can tweak with it. We'll certainly get into that. So with the University of St. Thomas, oh my gosh.
Oh no.
All right. My Mac does this. It seems to like Mario Brothers. I got a lot of those little things. So I'm going to restart the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about the University of St. Thomas as I restart the computer here. So the University of St. Thomas, as I mentioned, is a private college. We have about 10,000 students, about 6,000 undergraduate, 4,000 graduate. But we have two campuses. We have one campus in Minneapolis, as well as a campus in St. Paul. Actually, we actually have a third campus. It's in Rome, Italy, but we don't have a library there. We have 4 libraries at St. Thomas. We have a law library, which is located on our Minneapolis campus in downtown Minneapolis. We do have the Keffer Library, which primarily serves graduate students in business, psychology, education, as well as undergraduate education. That is on Minneapolis, as well as our Doherty Family College, which is our 2-year college, which just opened about 2 years ago. We also have the Ireland Library. That is on the St. Paul campus, and that is basically the theological library at the University of St. Thomas. And then our main library is the O'Shaughnessy Frey Library Center on the St. Paul campus. And that's about 6 floors. We have 2 basements, essentially. It's one of the only libraries that probably has natural light in the sub-level, because we do have skylights in our sub-level. And in that library, it houses a lot of our administrative services, some of our collection development and stuff like that. We also have a group on campus as part of IT called Stellar. It's with one L, St. Thomas E-Learning and Resources. And what they do is they have instructional designers who work with faculty in designing Canvas courses and online learning, basically, as well as other things too. They do things like VR in classrooms, stuff like that, doing video presentations, helping faculty record presentations to present to their students. Basically, we have a few video studios and stuff like that for faculty. So they're really integral in connecting faculty with learning technologies. And they're actually housed in the library. They're not really part of the library, we just have space for them. So that kind of helped us with the with the integration with Canvas. So the University of St. Thomas started moving towards Canvas almost 2 years ago. We moved from Blackboard, and we went all Canvas just this last fall. So there was that last spring in which we were kind of between the two. Some of the courses were piloting Blackboard or Canvas as they were moving from Blackboard. The Blackboard is now totally gone from campus. We have about 60 staff members amongst all the libraries. We have 16 reference librarians, and we have 1 web developer. So we are a campus that uses Amazon Web Services to host a lot of our cloud services, though we are a Microsoft campus as well. There we go. All right, yeah, I covered all that. Oh, every course automatically has a Canvas course set up for them. Whether they use it or not, it's pretty much up to them, but it's just there. That way they don't have to go through a request process or anything like that. You'll find that the library, as well as the university, does that a lot. One, just a lot of people, a lot of classes, to manage. It's just easier just to upload them all at once. 2, some people we find discover systems on their own, and then they just start using it. It just gets rid of a lot of friction. We use SpringShare LibGuides for our reference pages, and our library management system is Xlibris. So we use Alma Primo, and we also use Leganto for the course reserves. If you have Alma, if you have Alma, you have a little module there for course reserves. Leganto is enhanced course reserves. It's the same underlying thing, but Leganto really enhances that, especially for getting faculty involved in managing their own list of materials that they want for the classes. And I'll get more into that because that kind of plays an important role with what we use library help for. So me, I currently develop in PHP as well as jQuery, JavaScript, all that sort of stuff for the web within the library. I've been at the university for 22 years at St. Thomas, and that includes my time as a student. I was in a lot of departments as a student. I was sometimes called on to do special projects because I was one of the last remaining people on campus who actually knew Cold Fusion, and that kind of lasted maybe 3 or 4 years after I became full-time staff that they finally got rid of Cold Fusion. I spent 13 years in the Career Development Center in which I developed and maintained Java applications for them. So I spent a lot of my time there, but this is my 4th year in the library, and when the library position came up, I just kind of knew that that's where I wanted to go because my background, I studied English, philosophy, theology, as well as computer science while at St. Thomas. But as you can see, computer science has been what I've studied throughout the time. So you might say, oh, Chad must be an expert. He spent 30 years of his life from preschool through his graduate degree, so he must be an expert. I'm an expert beginner. I am really amazed by when I go to conferences like this and I see what other people are doing, and I kind of feel like I haven't really done much. I've started a lot of projects. I've done some pretty cool things, but it's still at beginner level. And actually, quite honestly, that's where I like to stay. I always like to try new things, maybe some things that other people aren't doing, and then, of course, sharing that with people. So don't think that I'm up here as an expert in any sort of way. I don't use Docker. I don't use some of those other fancy things that you'll see. I really don't know Python too much. I know PHP, and I know Java, and that's pretty much it. We have server admins that I sit down with them and I'm like, this is my project. I need to get this somewhere on Amazon or whatnot. Can you do this for me? And then they can do that. I'm not a server admin. But in terms of my studies in the humanities and me being a student for a long time and just doing user services, I do have that ability to kind of connect with the user and have empathy with them. So there is that soft side that you don't normally get with an engineer who's always trying to solve the problem. There's that soft side that I'm able to connect with. So today we're going to go over what is an LTI. We're going to look at options. The dream becomes a reality. We're going to go over how it works. We're going to get into a little code, but not too much really. Actually, I don't think you're going to see any PHP code. So that'll be good. Just a little bit of XML. What's the buzz? So, analytics, stuff like that. And what's next for the project? And then, of course, the GitHub repository. So what is an LTI? As I mentioned earlier, we had an opportunity when the campus was moving to Canvas, to Canvas from Blackboard. We had an opportunity, especially with Stellar, in our basement of the library, to connect with them and get in there from the beginning, so that when it was launched to faculty, we actually had something there for the library, for faculty, right there from the beginning. So, 2017, they started switching. Everybody was on Canvas by 2018. And as I said, we wanted in from the start. Unfortunately, we had no idea where to start. We didn't really know what an LTI was. LTI, when Canvas was being talked about on campus, it was thrown around, yeah, we can add LTIs. Okay, don't know what that is. And as we started looking into it, some vendors have a pretty wide definition as to what an LTI really is. So an LTI is a learning tool integration. So they're kind of like little plugins that you can install. You can install it either at the course level, so an instructor can install it, as long as the administrator has the ability to install apps at the course level turned on for instructors. So you can tell an instructor, hey, here's a cool tool that you can install. It helps you display YouTube videos better, or search YouTube videos specific to this, or even record videos and upload them to Vimeo right away in your course. So instructors can add their own tools. You can also install the tools site-wide. That way they're available to all instructors. And it's up to the admin the Canvas admin to decide, is this tool going to be on for everybody, or is it going to be available but disabled, allowing the instructor to enable it? And if you look at the list of apps, probably even on your iPhone or iPad, you accumulate a lot. So installing apps system-wide and just enabling them for everybody kind of creates a long list. So what we did was we needed to figure out what apps we wanted installed. What library apps would be beneficial to our users? What could we then go to the system administrators and say, hey, can we install these system-wide? So we requested a sandbox course from the admin, and we started playing around. We added a few like Docuseq, Films on Demand, library research guides, our LibGuides, as well as Naxos, music. And we took notes on what each did and what value they could add. So, as you see, we added some. Some were added to menus. So as you can see in the content editor, this is like an example of an instructor creating an assignment, and they want their students to watch a video. This video not only shows up, but also has the narration included too, so it's a very good embedding. Well, this is part of the Docuseq LTI. An instructor can go up to this insert menu, Docuseq. They can search Docuseq's items. They can find the video that they want to embed, and it can embed it. There's no copy of code from wherever, hey, use this HTML code, copy it, paste it in there. They don't really need to get into the HTML here. They can just insert it just like a WYSIWYG editor. Library research guides. You can actually go and you can embed pieces of content that a librarian, you have those little boxes in LibGuides. You can embed entire pages as well separately. And the instructor can go in and say, you know what, my librarian created this list of crime stats. I want to display that right here in my guide because I have an assignment that my students need to go out and they need to look at crime stats. That list is already created out on the LibGuides that my librarian created for me. I'm going to embed it here. So they can certainly do that. Some added themselves to the course navigation, this long list here. And it really seemed to serve no purpose. I mean, not only did it add itself to the menu, which seemed to do a great service, but it added itself over here too. This would be an example right there. And yet it really proved, it just linked out to the website. Well, okay. We were worried that instructors would hate how long the list got. And, well, I want to embed video from Docuseq, but I can't embed video from Docuseq unless I enable it here on this list too. You can't choose one or the other. If you enable Docuseq, I'm not saying that Docuseq is one of them, but if you enable the app, it shows up both in the menu to insert as well as that list there. You can't turn it off. And what benefit did that provide the student? Not really much. Then we found one, it's going to remain nameless. It just embedded their website in Canvas. So, and I'm going to point this out a few times as we talk about what we decided to do. We have a website within a website within a website. And we did not want an infinite number of websites in Canvas. So we evaluated what we could do. We made a case based on value and presented it to the Canvas admins. We came up with a list. We did not want to add an app just because we could or because it was available. It's kind of like Christmas albums. Just because you can record a Christmas album doesn't mean you should. I actually got that from a former staff member. We opted for the menu items that made embedding content easy. So we recommend these 3 LTIs to the admins: Docuseq, Films on Demand, and Library Research Guides, which is awkwardly named LibGuides manual mode if you go into the API area of LibGuides. And they said yes, with one caveat. Remove it from the course menu. Do not let anything show up in the course menu, because it is sacred space. So, how do we install something without getting in the course menu? Anyone know XML? A little? Okay. What's that? Nope. Nope. And I'll get to how LTIs work in a moment. And no, CSS is not an option. Yes?
Clarifying question. Which region of those displays is considered the course menu?
The course? Oh, sure. The course menu is...
I think I know, but I
Yeah.
want to be certain.
It's this menu right here. Yeah, this is a site-wide. This is course.
I have a question.
Yes?
I thought you could turn off some of those tabs. I mean, you did.
Okay.
I think
It might
course
depend
by
on...
course. I'm not
It
sure.
might depend. You can turn them, so like if we were to install the music app, for example, and install it in the menu as well as on the course nav, when we upload that config file, and I'll get to that in a moment, it has both of those, and there's not a checkbox to turn them on or off. But sometimes when you set up, if it allows you to customize that configuration from the get-go, then you can. All right. So installs are typically done with an XML file. Actually, they're pretty much always done with an XML file, whether you're actually copy-pasting the XML or just actually referring to it on another server. So sometimes they give you a link to a config XML file, like a URL, or sometimes they actually give you the XML text to paste in. So I dug into one of the XML files, and I found this little piece of content here. Options. Course navigation. Well, there you go. There was nothing in any sort of user interface that allowed me to generate this XML. This was just provided to us. And we could go in, and I was able to, I actually just deleted it. I don't know that I could really figure out which enabled actually meant. I just deleted it, and it worked. So we got things into the navigation menus. And we'll get into this a little bit more later. So I removed it, and there was no nav item. So we got our foot into Canvas. We made a LibGuide for helping instructors incorporate resources into Canvas. We told them how to use the menus, how to embed content, inserting Docuseq and on-demand content, creating permalinks, through easy proxy, adding resource lists like course, e-reserves, adding content from LibGuides. All this is available on our LibGuides. There's a link right there if you wanted to see what information we're giving to instructors. There was much rejoicing around our office that we actually got our foot in the door before Canvas went live with its first set of instructors. We were there ready so that when the instructional designer sat down with the instructors, right off the bat, they could talk with the library, and we would not have missed any opportunity. However, the next day we woke up and we felt we could do more. So we looked at options. We thought we wanted some sort of landing page. The Canvas admins loved the tools that gave faculty the ability to assist their students in viewing the information. Basically, it was all about access. We wanted a vision of presenting a library package. Okay, yeah, you can pull in pieces of content throughout your course, great, but what about library resources as a whole? Contacting your librarian, stuff like that. And we wondered what it would look like. Stellar had experience working with faculty. Our reference librarians had experience talking with both students as well as faculty. So we pulled them in and we thought, what are faculty asking for? What are students asking for? And kind of felt like, you know what, we got LibGuides, we got course reserves, and we got librarian contact info. Those are the things that we want to get out to those students. And those are the things that we've seen other universities incorporate into Canvas. And first of all, we wanted to make it frictionless. We just wanted it to appear before the very eyes. We didn't want any configuration. We didn't want to mess with anything like that. We just want title of this presentation, drag and drop. Just wanted that simple. So we looked at SpringShare, LTI Builder, AutoMagic. It's a pretty good resource. It's good, but it didn't do everything that we kind of wanted. We had e-reserves, which at the time was just a whole bunch of lists of materials that instructors could use for the course. Couldn't really incorporate that here. There was a lot of things that LibGuides AutoMagic did, and it was like, you know, we didn't really want to do it that way. It required librarians to manage metadata fields for each guide. So basically how it works, kind of similar to how ours work, but it uses metadata fields. Our librarians are actually used to using the tags fields, which is your editing. There's this tag thing, and they were used to that already. They were already tagging stuff because, you know, SEO was a big thing a few years ago, and we thought, hey, if we load this up with keywords, people will be able to find it. So they're already loading stuff in there. But that's right in the WYSIWYG editor as librarians are editing their courses. But metadata, you got to go into like the wheel cog, and then you got to go in here, and it's not in the forefront. Plus, metadata is not exportable via API last time I checked. You can export a LibGuides tags, and you can search by LibGuides tags. You can't search by LibGuides metadata. So if we weren't going to be using AutoMagic, metadata wasn't really going to help us. At the time, we did not have Leganto. As I mentioned, Alma has a built-in e-reserves, or actually a reserves tool. It's okay if you have librarians managing the data, but for faculty involvement, there really isn't anything there. We did move on to Leganto, which allows faculty to manage their own course listing of materials. You know, what books, what articles they want their students to read and stuff like that, which was great. Luckily, at the time, we didn't have Leganto, and we were really thinking we need these course reserves to appear in Canvas. Leganto kind of took care of that for us, but this was before Leganto, so we wanted this to appear. So it was a key thing for us. And also at the time, finding the resource lists for students was not easy to do. You could do it through Primo, but it wasn't exactly easy to point to. So nothing really fit our dream library course integration. So the question was, of course, can we roll our own? I kind of dread that sometimes. Although I love coding, I love it, but you kind of dread that. Creating a backend is just out of the question. We'd have to create admin pages, logins, data, databases, secure it, who has access, who doesn't. You can create items, but then who can edit? It's just a lot of information. I sometimes feel like building a backend is like 3/4 of any project. And we already have the data. We had it in LibGuides and we had it in Alma reading lists. So why rebuild it all? But seriously, could we? LibGuides has APIs to pull from. We have LibGuides CMS, which has APIs. Alma had an API to pull course data reserved from. Plus, we kind of now knew how to hack the XML, and we kind of knew what an XML configuration file looked like. But it's not for the wary. We still didn't have a grasp on how you work with APIs at the time. We didn't know much about what made them tick. We still kind of didn't have a clear idea of what we wanted. And how did the whole thing work? All right, now here's a piece where I'm going to get a little technical. If XML and figuring out that kind of stuff is just not your thing, sit back, drink your coffee or whatnot, and just think about puppies. That though I don't see blank looks, I just see smiles. So, this is what you'll need for creating your own LTI. You'll need a course in your learning management system that you can play around with. Just go to your admin administrator, hey, can I have a dummy course? Sandbox course, whatever. We are fortunate, I don't know if every institution has this, but we are fortunate that we have the production server for Canvas. We have a beta server, and we have a test server. And we can mess around with test and beta, and it just gets overwritten, I think, weekly by the live server. So if we mess things up, it gets overwritten. It's no big deal. And it only really takes 2 minutes to go through this. So this is something you can do at home. And this is what you'll get. You'll get an LTI that displays Hello Library in your LMS. It's just a start. It's just to play with. You can extend it from there. And you'll get experience installing and tweaking an LTI. And you'll get joy from it. So here are the steps for installing in Canvas. You can read this at home. Basically, visually, you go into the Add an App section. You can choose a configuration type by URL. You fill it. You give it a name. This name really only appears in the list of apps that you have installed. It doesn't appear in the title bar. It doesn't appear in the navigation menu or anything like that. So nobody really, public really sees that. Consumer key and shared secret, at this point, you don't even need to worry about. This is actually a URL, a working URL of an XML document that you can install on your own Canvas course. If you have Blackboard, you could probably modify it a little bit. This is specifically for Canvas. You can actually use that URL right there, and you can install an app on your Canvas course tonight, and you'll see what it does. You hit submit, and it'll appear. So this is my Canvas course. This is my sandbox. Hello Library. It says welcome chat. It knows who I am. It's kind of scary, but it does. It also knows what course I'm coming from. So tools for LibX 201X9, Chad's sandbox, with the ultimate answer for a question that nobody knows. So now delete it. Okay, so we did the simple route. We can delete it. We can install it again later. That's something that you're going to learn that you're going to do a lot. You're going to install something, you're going to delete it, you're going to install it, and you're going to delete it. It's fine. You're practicing, you're learning. To delete an app, you just basically go into the Apps section. You choose Hello Library, which is what we installed. This is where naming it kind of is important at the very beginning. You choose Delete. And yes, you're sure. So now we're going to get messy, and we're actually going to install it using XML. Because if you're going to create your own LTI, you're going to mess with an LTI, and play around with it, you're going to need to get your arms and elbows greased working around the XML code. Because some of the providers that I showed before, they didn't give me the XML for the config. I downloaded it using that URL that I showed you just previously. You can actually go to that URL that I showed you how to install that app, and you can see the XML. Copy paste it, modify it, and then use this to make your own customizations into what label you want to give the button and whether or not the course navigation is enabled and whatever else you want to do. If you are able to host your own PHP code, there is a companion file up there called launch.php that you can upload to your server, and you can point to your own server. That way you're not pointing to my server. You can certainly do that in Instructional and GitHub. So, So this is what the full example of a HTML config file looks like. Oh, no, it's not the full example, but it's the main content that you're interested with. Up here you have the title of your app. You have a description, and then the launch URL. That's basically what you're pointing to when you have your application hosted on some server somewhere. That's the URL that's supposed to display the page. This stuff you're not really too concerned about. This here, you list the launch URL again. I'll get to that in a moment. And then you can give it a name. This here is for the course navigation button. So whatever you put here shows up on the course navigation. And then you can add the app to your LTI. Similar to what we did before, but instead of using a URL, you're copying that XML code. You can actually just leave that XML code as it was and just copy paste it. Similar to what before, instead we choose paste XML. We give it a name just like before. We're going to not pay attention to that. We paste that code in there with any modifications. We did that a lot for our installs, that we could modify things to meet our specifications. Save it, and it shows up. It works. So the anatomy of a LTI. This is an iframe. This is why anything that you create, styling this area here, hiding things using CSS is not going to work. Your code is only going to run in the iframe, and it can't affect anything else in there outside of it. Also, with it being an iframe, okay. So if you look at the launch.php file, how did it know who I was? Well, the PHP file it looks at the post variable. I'll get to post in a moment. And there's a variable here. If you know anything about post and get, when you make a request, you're able to post or get data in the request. You're sending that data to another website. That other website is able to use that data in the return request as it processes stuff. So obviously variables are being sent from the LTI to your application. So this is pretty cool because there's a lot of things you can do about that. Now, as I mentioned, update the launch URL in both these areas. I don't know what the two differences are, but I know that the post request basically uses the launch URL, but you have problems if you get rid of one of them. And if you poke around in the code view a little bit in the browser, if you use right-click inspect element, you'll see that there's this hidden form that does the post request to your launch application, and then it shows up in this iframe. As you can see, there's the data that was returned. And if we look at the request, you can really dig in. A lot of people have done the inspect code, right-click inspect code, and look at that. Some people have not really gone into the inspector, the console debugger, style editor, performance. Network is key when you're talking about LTIs because you want to see how is the data going back and forth between these two services. You can actually scroll down this list. These are all the assets that were called to fill up the page, all the images, stuff like that. You see launch.php at the domain that you listed. You know that that's it. This is the data that the LMS sent to my application. This is where you get the data for those variables. It has my name down here, my family name, my full name, my given name, some IDs here that I just don't feel comfortable sharing. It also includes my role within Canvas, instructor, administrator, stuff like that. That's interesting. If I were a student, it would say student. So you now know if somebody using your application is a student or an instructor. Leverage that. This is what the LMS received back from the request. This is calling, it called out to the server. They got this information back, parsed the information together. And that's what was displayed in the iframe. So look, you got data. It passes that information, spits out more data. You can include more data. There's a whole bunch of other variables that you can include. There's ways to include custom variables. I'll list the documentation for that. And if you have the database if you have on your own system a database of users like Alma, you can actually use a user ID or whatever it is that you want to do and display info specific to that user. No. Do not do that without implementing OAuth first. OAuth is basically a encryption protocol. It's a cryptographic signing function that is used within a post request that makes sure that the information my application is receiving from a source is authenticated. So you've probably heard back in the day, some banks, you could log into your bank account, and you probably looked at the URL, and the URL said, what? You're at example.com, you logged into your account, you're logged into account 12345. You thought, what if I change this to a 6? I got somebody else's information. You can do that with post requests too. And if your application is not verifying that the data you're receiving was the actual data sent, in other words, it was not cryptographically signed, if you're not authenticating that, you can have a student log in as a student, modify the data that's being sent to your application, say that they're an instructor, and get information, or say that they're somebody else and get information. So if you're going to be presenting back user information that you have stored on your system, you need to be sure that you implement OAuth. But if you're just doing a standard, hey, this is a web page, you don't need to worry about OAuth at all. But just be aware of that. Of course, implementing OAuth is a story for another day. That's not something we're going to do here. All right. So some notes about hosting a launch file and your LTI. You can't just put a regular web page in there. I tried it. It doesn't work. You will need your own server to host launch file, included on GitHub. I included it on GitHub. Make sure it is hosted with HTTPS because it is displayed within an iframe on a secure page. And make sure you do post requests to that server. Typically, if you're hosting like a PHP application, yes, you can do post requests. If you're just using your library web page as that launch URL, typically web servers do not accept post requests unless you're expecting that they're serving up an application. So you will get like a 4 or 5 error. Also, make sure that nothing prevents a page from being displayed in an iframe, such as CORS or other restrictions. This is a cross-origin request something. Yeah, that's what the S stands for, something. Basically what that means is you can set up a server, or your admins can set up a server that says, if you're taking this JavaScript or this web page, it can only be requested from within another web page hosted on our own domain. You can specify what domains. That way, McAllister can't just host our JavaScript, or can't just create a web page that calls on our JavaScript, and the St. Thomas server will just send it back. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we validate where things are coming, or that we at least have some access control. So we kind of ran into that problem. At some point, somebody turned that on our static server, which posed a problem when we were hosting things on vendor sites. You know, you have JavaScript that you host on your web server that you then implement on some EBSCO host or whatnot. All of a sudden, EBSCO host can't call that script because it's not being hosted on your campus server. So make sure you don't have any issues there. Now, getting back to displaying your library page within Canvas, here we are again with a nested site. So we didn't even think about doing this. This is just an example. So be careful about what it is that you put in this area. Do you really want 1 navigation, 2 navigation, 3 navigation, 4 navigation going across your Canvas implementation? Probably not. And is that really the user experience you're going for? So as you start building your LTI, those are kind of things that you want to look at. So these are the resources that got me started on this next project that I'm going to go over here. So fun with building your own XML. You can actually go here and you can play around with, do I want it to show up? There's like a little checkbox form. What's the launch URL that I want this to go to? Do I want it to show up in course navigation? All that sort of fun stuff. You can learn more about the launch URL, why it needs to be frameable, postable, and HTTPSable. Writing LTI stuff, that's actually the name of the article. eduapps.org is a great resource. And Canvas variable substitutions. A lot of this information disappeared a few months ago, and it was gone. It was wiped from the website. But a lot of us crafty people figured out that it was still on their GitHub site, so we were able to go there and get it. They've since re-established it. So there's a whole bunch of variable substitutions. Those are the custom variables, like if you need the user ID and stuff like that from a user, you can have that sent to your application. So the dream becomes a reality. So there was a huge learning curve. We went through a lot there. We had to go through all that. We learned about SpringShare and Alma APIs. We learned about OAuth. That was actually kind of fun. Me with a security background, it was fun. Creating a web. We created a web application that would be called by the LMS. We learned about variable substitutions, config URL, launch URL secret, blah, 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 blah. We wrote a lot of code, some JavaScript, some CSS. OAuth again, because that's important. And then we did a little bit of XML. We presented, and it was accepted into the Canvas site, site-wide. Our stellar folk loved it. We were able to install it site-wide. We did not need to have faculty learn how to install the app. And it is available in every course. It is not enabled by default. So it is an app faculty have access to. We just need to tell them how to enable it. Hey, you know what? That's a big win. Oh yeah, and we got on the sacred space of, we've got to put ourselves in the course navigation, which is big. So these are the steps that we teach faculty. Step 1, all faculty know how to do this because they have to do this for their courses anyway. They need to go into their settings area. Once they're in their settings area, go to navigation. This part they're also familiar with because they are moving things around. This is what forms this list over here. There's disabled items down here, enabled items on the top. They can drag, suppose they don't want a certain thing showing up here, they just drag it down the bottom and it's disabled. If they want something that's disabled, they want to enable it, they just drag it up. So they're already familiar with that. So 1, 2, 3, drag, drop, save. Something faculty already know how to do, and we got it done. This is what shows up. Now this is an example, it's an example course. This is an example of a course that has a link to the library homepage at the top, librarian information here, any guides associated with that course there. We do list our Discovery Search interface in here as well. We have related databases listed, as well as the resource list. And the resource list is that e-reserves component that we were talking about. We have it listed here. In by section, faculty have the ability to say, this section is only available during this week. This section does not appear before this week. So, there's dates, expirations, and it follows all that. So we got the link, research course guides, librarian profile. It can display multiple profiles. It can display multiple LibGuides. So if I have multiple LibGuides tagged with libx201, it will display all those. Related databases, it can either be subject, so it can give the high level, or you can choose to display all the databases that are listed within that subject as well. And then, of course, the resource list. And in the midst of, while I was programming this, we went from just plain old course reserves to Leganto, and it's the same API. I didn't need to make any code changes, so that was great. Oh yeah, we also have the chat widget down here. So we have chat. We do use libchat, but we wrap it kind of in our own wrapper that pops out, so we can do some custom things, like when an operator, it checks to see whether or not there's an operator, and if it's not, we weren't happy with the libchat operator away feature. We actually, because we use askmin, yes, for off hours, which is basically a whole bunch of librarians Minnesota-wide that are scheduled to take over chat when we are not available. So we kind of have a custom chat widget. Oh, and that code is available on our GitHub as well. So how does it work? Keep it brief. Starts out by taking a LibGuide, as I mentioned. That's kind of our preferred method. Taking LibGuides also allows us to look into integrations with like a Primo. If we can teach students to go into Primo and type in libx200 in the search, and they'll get the course LibGuide. So we can take a guide. So if we have Geology 201, we can take a guide with Geology 201, and when a professor drag drops library help into their course, it finds it. Now, if there's not a guide for Geology 201, but there's a guide for geology, and we're talking about a guide here, it'll find that. So it strips off 201 and just goes, hey, well, the department is geology. I'll see if there's any guides related to geology. Well, maybe there's not a specific guide for geology because it's good enough for the subject page. So it just goes to the subject page for geology. Great. And if it still doesn't find one, maybe it's a weird new course we haven't updated yet. Or if it's a community page rather than a course itself, it just creates a link to the LibGuides homepage. Now, what if it gets complicated? You have those entry-level courses. You have lots of instructors. Maybe some of those instructors have different things that they want presented to their students. Are we able to create multiple Math 111s for 3 instructors, 15 instructors, 15 sections? Yes. You can actually take a guide with the course code dash last name. So then we have 3 instructors who teach all 15 of those sections. Yep, you can do that. There's always these what-if questions, especially if you work with kids. What if there are 2 Smiths in the math department? Well, it doesn't take a math major to know that the possibility is that it's probably astronomical. The likelihood is probably very low, but even if they want a different thing, it can be accommodated. It gets a little wonky. You kind of have to know what sections each Smith teaches, because you can take it by section. Typically, you don't want to take it by section because semester after semester, sections change, so you kind of want to stick with either the course or the instructor because those don't really change too often. But you can do it by section. So Dr. Thomas has a math course, or has several math courses, several different levels, but he just wants one guide. Hey, it's easy for the librarian. They just need to create one guide, keep it up to date. All you need to do is just department-Thomas, and it'll find it. Different campuses, no, we cannot accommodate that yet. That's one thing that was unique about St. Thomas, is that we only have certain courses at certain campuses. We typically did not have like an English 100 course offered at multiple campuses with different libraries until a year ago when we had the Doherty Family College come on a campus. Now all of a sudden we have a librarian for St. Paul showing up on the Minneapolis pages. Well, we need to fix that. So we are working on that. There's a custom field in Canvas that we can use, that we can add to our app, that Canvas will then send to our application, and it can get things corrected. So how are things going? We launched spring 2018. Faculty members said, wow, I didn't know I had a librarian assigned to me. That was like our first comment we got. It was like just still demo, like it wasn't even released yet, and we showed that to our faculty, and she's like, wow, I've seen her. I didn't know she was a librarian. And I'm glad to know she's available to help me. School of Divinity and Doherty Family College, that's a 2-year college there. They went ahead and they had an admin assistant go through every single course and add it automatically. So we had good buy-in there. Faculty have found, dragged, and dropped it on their own. We didn't even need to market it to them. They found it, they did it. We got a call, hey, I don't have a LibGuide or a wrong LibGuide showing up. Can you fix that? So all of a sudden we're getting contacted. And they know who to contact now because their librarian file shows up. And students in the campus-wide user experience group express frustration. Librarians come to our class. Once they leave our class, I don't know how to get back. We show them this. I want my instructor to use that. That's what they told us. And now IT wants to incorporate something similar on the intranet page. IT knows what student enrollment. So when a student logs into our intranet, it knows what courses that student is enrolled in. Display the courses with a link with information as to what resources they have available to them for that course. IT wants to incorporate that. In fact, I didn't mention Library Help has an API built in that not only is it pulling data, it can also send data out to other services. It does the aggregation of who the librarian is and all that sort of stuff on its own. And it can send that out. So that way your IT people don't have to recreate the wheel and all that logic of that search that I talked about. Stats, actually pretty good. We've had 3,000 interactions since the beginning of last semester. A lot of click-throughs to LibGuides. This is last semester there, and we, of course, you know, we've seen a spike this semester as more people are using it. It's installed in over 200 courses in Canvas already. This is just a basic list. Where do students go? Well, students obviously in Geology 115 are clicking on the link to get to the LibGuides, and we know that students in that course are really using it. And if you looked at the stats, you saw that there were 221 uses labeled as public. There is a public component. If there's any customization that an instructor wants to this, they can choose to not display certain things that we select. They cannot turn off Librarian. We do not give that as an option. And we could if we wanted to. There's a simple configuration file that we could say, yeah, let them turn off. There is a method of displaying it as of getting a link and displaying it that way. So if you're not using Canvas, you can still install this. And if you have the ability, it's called like redirect tool in Canvas. There's probably something similar in like Blackboard and Moodle. You actually display it still in any other system as well. Plus you got that API feed that you can use. So you don't even really need to use the LTI itself. You can use some of the additional components it has. So that's how public, because it can be displayed outside of Canvas as well. So as I mentioned, we would like to gather feedback. Basically right now it's a proof of concept. You took a whole bunch of pieces. There's very little user interaction there other than they're just links. Layout, there's a few things we could fix, stuff like that. But we definitely want to know how to arrange them better. And we need to contact the stakeholders and stuff like that more. Immediate develop, as I mentioned, handle the 2-year college. And as I mentioned, again, we have APIs that could be used. Maybe we can offload some of that processing to like some of the Amazon Web Services. Since they are kind of like standalone, they can be separated from the application. We can certainly do that with Lambda. This is where it gets interesting as to, we know that instructors are instructors, so we could do contextual help. We know that they are instructor when the page is fed because Canvas told us that they're instructor. So how about if they don't have any course guides, or we could put a little thing, hey, is this correct? And we could, you know, and only instructors would see that, students wouldn't see that. Maybe there's additional services that we could prompt instructors for. Maybe they don't have resource lists yet. Maybe we could prompt them, hey, would you like resource lists? So as I mentioned, it's on GitHub. It requires PHP 7, at least. Basically, there is a configuration file, and there's no databases or anything like that. It's just one configuration file. You fill some of that stuff in, and you can get going right away. There's a wizard associated with it, so that when you fill out the first few things within configuration file, you install it. You go to the tools webpage, all that's in the documentation, and it walks you through creating private keys, stuff like that. And it's designed to be customized. St. Thomas isn't really hard-coded in it anywhere. You can make it your own. And there's a lot you can customize. Because I did not want to have to go in and recode a whole bunch of stuff. So I made sure customization was key. And out of the box, it does not require Alma or Leganto. OAuth is already implemented in it, so then you don't need to worry about that. and as I said, it's also an API. And you can always just delete it and start again. It itself is pretty much drag drop done. All right, so that was a crash course. I got in, even with the technical difficulties at the beginning. 3 minutes left for questions. I'm available if you have any questions afterwards. Are there any questions? Yes?
Did you, so when, did you put in any constraints on the maximum kind of length? Or, for example, let's say a faculty has a reading list that has 100 items on it.
And we have one like that.
Okay, so did you build in any kind of limiters, or it'll just kind of scroll the whole thing?
The iframe itself is a set thing, so you do have the scroll within the scroll within the scroll. But that's just kind of the limit of the LMS. So yeah, you can scroll all the way down. And that's just how it is. I wish it would do like the Alma thing, or the Primo thing, where it actually determines how big the iframe window is, and then it expands it. I wish it would do that.
So you're using Leganto now to generate reading lists.
Mhm.
Faculty they obviously have to use that LTI as well, one?
Yes, to create it, yep.
To create, and then they can decide to have it show up in this tool, right? Do faculty tend to prefer one LTI or the other? Do they like
That's what we need feedback on.
Okay.
Because again, this was developed before we had Leganto. Now it can, maybe after faculty creates their Leganto list, maybe they hide that thing if they're able to do that without like killing it. Yeah, definitely. We don't know yet.
Okay.
I mean, for some faculty it might make sense, for some it might not.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of extra features
Yeah.
in your tool.
And this should also, when it's set up, because it's Leganto, it should also still keep all the metrics as to all that reading stuff. Yes?
A lot of this, you had mentioned that you've already gotten some faculty who are happy to use it, but then it's not pulling up the right guide. How much, because a lot of it is hinging on the tagging of guides, how much of an effort has that been to clean those up, and how many of those kinds of fixes have you had to do in response to faculty?
Typically, it's not usually the wrong guide. It's typically, I have a guide, it's not showing up. So it's just a matter of getting contact. I mean, if they have a guide, they've already been in contact, hopefully, with us. It's just a matter of, we've told the reference librarians, they're made aware of it. We'll tell them again. It's amazing how, you tell them several times, and months or two later, hey, what's library help? I had an instructor call me about this. And you're teaching it again. It's just, you just got to keep going over it. Yeah, and we're doing a LibGuides cleanup right now too. So we're doing that, and we're really emphasizing tags because we're integrating it into other systems. So it's going to be a huge cultural thing that we need to go through. But hopefully with tags, it's easy. Yes?
This might be a dumb question, but how do I know who's pulling the right guide to the courses? Do you have to rely on the faculty to tell you?
Well, if it's Philosophy 111 and it's named Philosophy 111, that should be an indicator. But if it's just an econ general guide, there's that public component where if you as a librarian don't have access to Canvas, you have the public viewable thing where as a librarian you can go, you can type in the course code and you can see what shows.
Okay.
So there is that view into it too.
So if a faculty member has installed it and they have a complaint, it's probably correct, right?
You would hope so. I mean, if anything, it's probably most likely going to default to subject guide level. Yeah. I mean, why would you have a Philosophy 112 show up for Philosophy 111 unless you coded 112 with PHFIL 111. All right, thank you.